welcome to the Post Talk Podcast, the podcast where we interview post-production professionals in the film industry. Today, I'm joined with Anastasia Cipolla. Her clients include Netflix, the History Channel, A&E, Viceland, Discovery, and major international brands. In addition, Anastasia is an experienced editor, finisher, post-production consultant, and a member of the Colorists Society International. Today, Anna and I will be talking about the art of color grading, how to start seeing like a colorist, as well as grading in HDR. Today, I am joined with Anastasia Cipolla. How are you doing?
Hi, Matt. Good. Everything's great. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. So we're going to just jump into this. So we're going to ask the first general question. We ask it to everybody. How did you get started as a colorist?
That's the million-dollar question. And I guess you got all kinds of different answers. So yeah, in my case, I've always had a very strong interest in photography, and movies in general. And so I ended up being an editor for a few years. And I loved it. And I did some color on the side. And then I decided to just pack and come to the United States, to New York. I kind of like have this big dream of living in a city and trying to make it in New York. And when I came here, I was like, okay, well, I have a skill as an editor. And I'm going to be able to kind of like maybe find some work. And I somewhat got pushed into color grading and got trained on the job. They knew I had a little bit of experience, and so I just got trained and started working, doing reality, doing a lot of TV, short films, getting that into documentaries, getting into like bigger projects. And in the beginning, I was also like kind of like resisting the color grading world. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I was like, this is great, but I wasn't really convinced that was a good match. And the reason is because I was still learning. And after a while, though, I just like one day I still remember, something clicked. I'm like, I love this. I just don't want to go back into anything. I just want to do this. And so, yeah, that's how I started. And definitely helped a lot the fact that I had this background in editorial. So doing conforms, doing all the technical part, doing online editing also.
It's pretty cool to hear that you were, at one point you were like, maybe it's not for me. And then you were like, oh no, this is my love and passion,
Yeah, in total honesty, I was very frustrated in the beginning. I was doing work and I was producing work, but I wasn't really happy. I wasn't really aware of this profession and how much you could push yourself and the footage itself. And I will always be thankful to the people that trained me, to the post-production supervisors and people who were giving me feedbacks, because that's how I learned. I learned by people being like, hey, it's okay, you can do this. Just keep doing it. This is what you gotta look. This is what looks good. This is what doesn't. When they were giving me feedbacks, and that's very, very important in the beginning. You had feedbacks from supervisors and other colorists. They have more experience than you. Yeah. And so something clicked one day, as I said, and I was like, oh, I think I'm getting a hang of this. This is cool. I can do it.
I do see what you mean, where it can feel a bit like pressure because there are a lot of aspects of the job that even I'm still, trying to figure out like client relations and sometimes some things just don't work out, you're trying to hit a certain look for a client and then they're, maybe they didn't light a certain way that they're trying to get, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the beginning of everything you do in life, I think that it's the toughest, but it's just that, again, I went to art school and I was interested in photography and it was kind of like, okay, this makes sense now. This is where I have to be.
Would you say for young colorists who are really trying to, get into color, would you say it's very important for them to develop a love for photography and art and things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you are fascinated by the world of color grading and anything, this is why you do it, right? You have a love for photography, for art, for kind of like, it's like, sometimes it's really like digital painting.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So there is, yeah, definitely that helps. I mean, some people come from more technical background,
Hmm.
and that's great too, because you really know inside out all the color science and all like um, that approach, which is good too. I mean, I don't think there is a right or wrong way to come into being a colorist. I know colorists that are architects.
It is good. Also, I will meet like colorists who are also like athletes, or they do a
Mm-hmm.
science sport or something, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah, and it's definitely like now these days, like the tools are there to learn. It's not this obscure like profession like it used to be like even 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
what would be like a good monitor you would recommend for a young colorist kind of getting in? We're in weird times right now where the pandemic is still sort of around and people are trying to build at-home suites. What would you recommend for people trying to build that at home?
So if you're just practicing, let's put it this way, if you're just practicing for yourself to learn, you don't really need you need a color reference monitor that's going to be calibrated because you need to be able to tell your client, hey, I'm getting the right signal, I have, everything's calibrated and you're creating masters. So set that aside, you can practice anyway if it's just for yourself. As brands goes, here in the United States where we are, I think that Flanders Scientific, it's a great brand. Personally, I have a Flanders and it holds calibration wonderfully. Um, there are also Sony monitors, Panasonic, if you're in Europe, it's a great brand. You told me you have an Ito, it's also very good. There's many brands, You also, it also depends what you need to do. If you're doing SDR broadcasts, you can get a good monitor under $5,000,
Right.
which it seems like a lot of money, but it is this job, part of the job is actually making a lot of hardware investments,
Oh, definitely. I mean, just also to like to note like that where you can't just plug the monitor into the graphics card, you have to buy a Blackmagic deck link, and then output it to a clean source and all that.
Yeah, if you're using, Blackmagic products, that's how they're set up. Otherwise, if you're using other systems, you can use other cards, and there are many options out there.
Nice, nice. And you're primarily in Resolve grading?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Everyone who's listening, because we're obviously we're not showing, but as we're on Zoom here, I see the mini panel in the back. I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Do you like the mini panel?
I love it. I
Nice.
love it. It's really like makes you work faster. It
Mhm.
makes you work faster. However, there are some very experienced and famous colorists that, believe it or not, they don't use panels. They
Mm.
don't even use the Wacom tablet.
Mm.
But if some people, like if you got a keyboard set up pretty solid in terms of macros and your keystrokes, it's good too. You can learn without. But yeah, I love my panels. I bring them everywhere. I used to bring them everywhere.
You're also pairing you with the Stream Deck, I think, right there. I,
Yeah, that's one of my latest addition, and I'm still like mapping it.
yeah, yeah. Well, you have looks like the XL. I have the mini, the $150 one, but I imagine like, all the buttons kind of intimidate you because you're like, well, I don't know what to put here, you know?
I know. I was like, I'm gonna get an XL because I'm gonna fill it up fast. I'm still filling it up, and actually, you can go sub menus too, so you can actually multiply all the keystrokes that you can put there. It's not just 36. You can double, triple those. I mean, you have to go a step down,
Right.
but it's definitely doable.
Nice, nice. That's very good enough. So anyone who's listening, if you're looking into that, these are some great tips. Getting a Stream Deck, panels. You don't even need panels sometimes.
I mean, yeah, you can get all this stuff. It's also cool to have, to be honest, but the keyboard mapping, it's one of the most important thing for me, especially because I come from editorial, and so I always had my my settings with me, and even with like color grading. There are sometimes, the panels get stuck. I have still my muscle memory on like the keystrokes on the keyboard because
Nice.
you never know.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Um, so to move forward as well, to also talk about just post production in general. A big part of post production, I think, where it really starts is regardless of the role you want to be in, VFX, color, editor. I think it all starts with organization. What do you think
Yes.
about that?
I agree 100% with you. It's all organization. And the earlier you, as a post production operator, artist, you come into the picture, the better it is.
Hmm.
For example, the projects that I had more fun doing and that I think they're more successful, they're the ones where I got involved in pre-production.
Hmm.
Where you can really talk to the DP and like, hey, we want to do this looks and this kind of filming, and what do you think? You talk about even like giving input about wardrobe design. I know that these things like they've been probably said many, many times, but it's worth repeating because it's so much better when you get involved from before,
Hmm.
and and see what everybody is doing, VFX too, it's very important that you talk to VFX people right away. Some high-end colorists don't go even on set, which is amazing.
Oh yeah, yeah. Do you think that might be a thing for production to bring a colorist on set, like as a supervising colorist, if it isn't already?
Oh yeah, it's happening. It's definitely happening. And I think it's happening even more with HDR.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because, HDR, as much as it's a wonderful new technologies, this technology, it's bringing some challenges with wardrobe.
Right.
How certain patterns react, how certain reflections hit the specular highlights in makeup also.
Mm-hmm.
So it is absolutely something that's going to be much more important. And I think for VFX heavy films, even more. Like if you're doing a comedy, if you're doing like something more like, you know, that doesn't require a lot of effects, probably is not that important.
Right.
But for some type of films, yeah.
That might even kind of be some falling into the role of the DIT a little bit, because as we have heard a little bit through live grading and stuff like that, which is apparent, but I think it's building popularity. I don't think it's quite there yet, so like where it's on every single shoot. But I have
Mm-hmm.
seen it a couple times, or been hearing about it. Oh, there was a DIT on set. He was doing a little
Mm-hmm.
great. What do you?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do a lot on set. DITs actually.
Yeah, oh,
I
yeah.
mean, they do the first pass most of the times.
Oh,
They
really?
create the CDLs.
Hmm.
Most of the time, it's very important what the DIT does because, well, first of all, it's on set, so he knows a lot about what's going on there and how things are supposed to look.
Hmm.
And sometimes they create lots, but they also do sometimes the CDL, so which is the daily look, right?
Right.
And in some scenarios, this is what, when the editor is working, that's what, the producers, everybody get used to that look. They keep looking at that. So it's interesting as a role. They
Mm.
create the first look.
Yeah, yeah. And they are also sort of they are the bridge from production to post a lot of the time, where a lot of that footage needs to be organized in a way to get safely to the edit room.
Right, right. And they're very technical. And yeah, and that's talking about how you get into color. Most of the time, a lot of the ITs get into color. They get in the room at the end.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it's a very natural transition, I believe.
It is a very cool role. I've seen a couple DIT cards in person, and as I'm looking at them,
Yeah,
like, wow, it's a color suite on wheels, basically.
yeah.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to sort of like take a step back, so we just kind of took a trip around post and production. So getting back into the color room talk.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about communicating with clients, which is a huge part, I think, of the job.
It is.
Maybe not everyone loves, because I'm introverted. Some people just don't like it. Some people love it. What do you think about, having to communicate back and forth looks with a director?
I personally am an introvert, extrovert.
Hmm.
So I really enjoy interacting and talking with the clients and staying with the clients in the room. It gives me energy, you know. Um, it's like I love the exchange. I love to see the reactions. Um, but I also like to work by myself.
Hmm.
You know, it's nice to have that moment by yourself.
Right.
Communicating with clients is key, not just how you communicate, but really listening. Listening to, I don't know, it's a skill that comes with time and you never really stop learning in that sense. It's like, I mean, I think it comes down to being a decent human being and really, really listening to people, really want to collaborate and just be there for them. Like for me, I love to be there for them and be like, how can I help you? What can we do? The
Right.
people, when they come to you, usually, you know, they've been with this project for so long. They just want to have fun. They just want to have their look together, get the finishing, bring it home. And so I love that.
Is the biggest part is listening. We're
Hmm.
here, we're reading, we're doing our thing. Like, and someone explained to me, it's when they're watching the colors, it's like watching a pianist work. You just sort of know
Yeah.
what you're gonna go to whatever the image needs. But at the same time, we also need to be able to take a second back. And if we're pushing the look too far, we need to be like, okay, yeah, all right, I agree.
Yeah, there's also a different scenario, even in this situation of the client session, right? Because you might have a session where there's like 5, 6 people, you don't know who to listen to, and it's the first time. It's very stressful. It's like I've been very stressed sometimes, but at the same time, then you realize there are people like you when they know that they can trust you, that you know what you're doing, they relax. It's good. And it's also nice when you can work with the same team over and over because I mean, the pressure of performing, it's kind of a performance, never goes away, but it gets better. And as you get to know the team, everybody feels almost like at home.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. One of the things I wanted to also talk about when communicating, with the
Mhm.
client back and forth, what kind of workflows have you encountered, whether it's short form or long form? Whenever someone approaches someone for a colorist, it's like, okay, we can do an XML route or we can do a pre-conform. How often are you seeing a pre-conform versus the XML, or what's your preference?
Okay, so my preference, it's always to work with raw footage.
Right.
And I will do anything possible according to budget, usually according to time, to to make sure that I can work with raw footage.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not something that can happen all the time, and you don't really need it all the time. I would say it's a split 50-50. It depends of budgets, of projects, and needs of the project. Sometimes we also do hybrid workflows where you bring in some XMLs or some EDLs, and then you bring in also some pre-conformed sequence.
Mm-hmm.
That especially is true for documentaries because in documentaries you sometimes have footage that's really old.
Right.
You have like mixed frame rates and sometimes to get those projects done within the time frame required, um, you need to simplify the workflow. And second, sometimes I mean for low res footage, you don't really it would not benefit to you to have the original media, right? If that's an MP4 or an H.264, you know.
That is something I would like to touch base on with documentaries and long form.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some people say like, well, I will get a documentary and I'll just do the pre-conforms of just interviews, or I'm just doing this. But what happens when,
Yeah.
let's say you get approached for a documentary and they want you to go through the whole thing, if possible. How would you, on a technical level, like simplify that workflow of like, let's say there's like archival footage in the timeline, but then you needed to bring it in Resolve. How would one go about that?
Well, first of all, like you really need to know. So you need to see the project. You
Hmm.
cannot ever, and I say ever, agree to do a project if you don't see a cut. I mean, this is a rule of mine and many other colleagues because, you know, you get burned once, you don't get burned twice. You have to see what you're going to be working on. And because you need to take time and look at the project and ask questions about, you know, what's going on in this shot? I saw there's a blur. I saw there's a weird movement. Can we, you know, so when you have an idea, a general idea, what's your project going to be like, you can ask some questions. And maybe, for example, let's say I have a project where there's a weird motion blur or something. I might request that shot to be sent to me separately. And I'll work on it. Or, yeah, or so again, having pieces that are pre-conformed and pieces that are not. Or maybe have raw media on the side with an XML. I mean, that has happened to me lately, which I had like an hour show for 4 episodes, and they were like all baked in. But then I had also requests the original media files. And for some problematic clips, I had some lookup table that were baked in, and I didn't want them in. I went and I reconfirmed to the original footage by myself, and so I was able to not even bother the assistant. Because sometimes when you get these big projects, you know, and there's a lot of work to do, you also need to be able to be fast on your feet and figure out things.
Right.
Once you got everything in, I think that groups in Resolve are a great feature. You know, it's basically organizing your work in smaller tasks.
I was gonna say one of the things I recently ran into, like, because I'm a color assistant currently, so I'm learning how to clean up, you know, which I think is the most important part, and it's making me learn as a colorist. I think it really starts with not only before you touch the wheels, before you start creating the looks, which yes, that's important. I think it is important to first learn conforming, because that is a beast within itself, you know.
Yes, I mean, however, not everybody is in this world where they need to learn the conform.
Yeah.
I'm doing type of work. I mean, I'm up there in years of experience and everything, and I still, as a freelance, do my conforms. There's, yeah, if you're starting out, it's great to learn that. And if you're starting out, you should know about codecs, about file types, because you need to know how much can you push an image. And so if you know the technical side of the image, it's important, it helps you. However, not everybody has to do that. I mean, there are colorists, they sit and they just do the color page.
Yeah.
If you're in a big facility, you do that. And you have assistants, you know, working for you on the other sides.
What would be some good, like, organization tips you could give to young colorists? One that I ran into recently was deleting empty tracks in the timeline.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, like I didn't know that was a thing, but people like that, you know?
Look, you have no idea how important it is that, like, if you're an assistant editor listening to this, it seems like, oh, the people don't even think about it. It's nothing bad that they do. But yes, for us colorists, it's really nice to receive a nice and clean sequence with just the minimum amount of tracks that you need. Perhaps no sound, because you don't use sound, or that's an extra. But I would say what I would do to stay organized, you have to use folders, have a bin structure a certain way, you know. Flags are very good in Resolve. You can flag your footage based on many different parameters and metadata. Yeah, there's so many organizational tools, but pretty much you need to find what works for you. I mean, I think what really works for us, it's the organizing groups, or let's say separating the footage based on camera, or sometimes like finding a color management workflow to bring different color space to pretty much in the same ballpark. But in the beginning, it might be, the color space management might be intimidating. But right now that Resolve has made bigger improvements in color space management, I think that any young colorists should start paying attention to that. Like, not getting obsessed over it, but definitely like learning about it.
Yeah. One of the things that it reminds me of is the using too many nodes joke that I hear a lot.
Oh yeah.
um, I mean, I do think that that comes down to preference. I heard that Resolve used to be different, where it would only let you use X amount of like power windows or something, and now it's like you can do whatever you want. But that doesn't mean that you have to. You know, if you use too many nodes and you're not even using all of them, or you are using like 30 nodes, it's like it really shouldn't be like that. You know?
Yeah, I don't know. It makes me think a lot of, like, hey, look, I got the best car, the fastest car. I got this Ferrari. It's like so cool. Look how many doors I have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But which is why not? They're free. You don't pay to create a new node. But yeah, they're heavy. They're heavy on the UI and the GUI and everything. So it depends on what kind of computer you have, what kind of work you're doing. I
Mhm.
love to work with node structures that are like fixed, but definitely, sometimes I work like that. Let's say I'm doing a movie or something where I can reuse the same structure. It's very useful. It's very useful if you use certain tools like Repo, um, but it's not necessary all the time,
Mhm.
especially if you're starting out.
Right.
There's many other things that I would pay attention to.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
I do restoration, film restoration on the side, and yeah, and we use saying this because of the node situation,
Mm.
because we use 5K files uncompressed, and they're very very heavy, and we have crazy machines that work, but they're because we use a lot of like plugins and OFX.
Right.
These timelines sometimes they're very problematic to work with, and with the team, we have to unfortunately use the less amount of nodes as possible. For me, it was bad because I was used to do like every node, one operation, very clean, very organized, and now for this type of projects in Resolve, I have to do many things on maybe one or two nodes,
Hmm.
which is not ideal, but it's a compromise.
Hmm. That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's good to know.
It seems like the feel free to cut this, but it seems like the resolved nodes, if they're not deactivated, they're still slightly intensive for the process.
Okay. Like even if you disable it, and it's like off, but it's still running through the pipeline.
No, if you have it off, it's fine.
Okay. To ask to that, a lot of colorists. I had asked this I think maybe two podcasts ago, but I love to also keep talking about it because it is a big thing with colorists even today. Is printer lights. Some people love
Hmm.
them, some people hate them. I love using them. What do you think?
Yeah, I love using them too.
Hmm.
I think printer lights, I mean, they're definitely not necessary on every project, but I love even if it's started for film, thinking about a logarithmic image, I find out that most of the times, as a first pass, as your first node, doing an offset adjustment like that, it's the best thing you can do.
Hmm. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Good to know. Good to know. I'm not screwing it up. I'm doing it good.
It's really good. And that's the thing. If it doesn't work, if you feel like this is not the right tool for me right now, I mean, that's not a rule. It
Right.
used to be a rule. It's not anymore.
Oh yeah.
So you don't have to use them if for a certain type of footage it's not getting you work fast.
Yeah. I mean, well, that is also the cool thing about grading in general is there really almost are no rules in a way. Which also kind of, I guess, leads me to one of my next questions is about scopes. Some people, I think, in the beginning, they follow them too religiously. Um,
Hmm.
and that sort of can hold people back at times. What would be the best way to not only learning how to read scopes, but also, being able to read the scopes and on a professional level?
I mean, scopes are important for everybody.
Hmm.
and especially in the beginning, but you never stop using scopes.
Oh yeah.
So there are many, of course, resources like books where you can learn more about scopes, but also you need to take scopes with a grain of salt in a sense they are like a visual and technical representation
Mm-hmm.
of the image
Mm-hmm.
according to certain parameters, right? So they're nothing more, nothing less. It is very important to use scopes in the beginning. It is very important to how am I going to say this? When you're tired, when you don't know, when you've been working a long time, scopes are paramount, they're fundamental. But you cannot, you probably have tried that, right? Like, you know what's the perfect line of the skin line, the skin tone line? That doesn't work all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
That's an abstraction. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of the scope that's an abstraction, and you need to still trust your eyes. The scopes are more for like double checking something, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Am I seeing that correctly? Yeah.
yeah, I think so.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah. Yeah. I've always, so far I've been told taking breaks is very important, but whenever
Yes,
you've been
yes,
going at it really long or something, you do need to start relying on those scopes. Where even you could have like the best monitor, but if your eyes start playing tricks with you, it kind of gets a little weird. Yeah.
yeah. It's fundamentally it's very very important to take breaks, and we don't take enough sometimes.
A good colorist had once. I was listening on a different podcast, and they were saying, "You ever put on those yellow sunglasses and everything looks yellow, right? But then after a few minutes of wearing them, your eyes sort of
It's
adjust."
just
Yeah, and then you take them off, and you're like, ah! You're like, no. But it's kind of like that a little bit, in a way.
oh yeah, understanding. We trust our eyes too much sometimes.
Mm,
Especially when you start staring at an image, that's no good. If I realize that I get obsessed over an image, I just walk away.
mm,
Because your eye automatically adjusts. So even if you're doing a match and you're comparing two stills, your eye, if you keep staring at stuff, your eye just makes an adjustment. It creates similarity.
that's a good takeaway for this. Your eye
Mm-hmm.
creates similarity. I'm gonna remember that. And so as we're nearing the end here, we have to
Mm-hmm.
talk about HDR because I mean it's like one of the big things. We can't not talk about it.
I
Um,
know.
how have you done grading in HDR?
I've been doing some work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working actually right now on a short film in HDR.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing a lot of practice, not big projects yet, besides this one.
Mm-hmm.
It's been fun. Like HDR, it's really fun. There's definitely a learning curve. It's different type of grading. And I've been experimenting a little bit in like doing SDR first and HDR after, or doing HDR first and SDR after. I'm still like finding my way in it, but it's really awesome. It's really exciting.
Have you messed with Resolve 17's new HDR wheels?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. What do you think about them?
I think it's a great addition. It's a great tool.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing even for me to see like how like if you compare HDR and SDR, there's no comparison. Like in the definition, it's this contrast that comes out of it.
Yeah.
Um, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Great, but it's a different type of workflow. It's a
Right.
different way of working, and I think we're all still kind of like finding our. Not me personally, I'm still finding my way in.
Mm-hmm.
Still finding what do I like better.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because some people will say like I guess to the general consumer, right now there's HDR10 plus I think on Netflix and there's also an HDR thing on YouTube. I've been hearing. I haven't looked at either.
Yes, yes, YouTube does HDR, but
Okay.
it doesn't allow you to do. Doesn't do any kind of trimming, from what I know. Might be wrong,
Okay.
but yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and And I've been hearing like for the consumers that people don't know what HDR is. They're like, "What is that? What is this thing?" And they see it, and then they're like, "Okay, well, how is the difference from SDR?" And
In industry capitalistic push to this technology,
Mhm.
let's be honest, it's not just, 4K. If you think about the difference between a TV 4K and HD, it's not that much of a difference.
Right.
To see the difference between 4K and HDR, you're like, wow.
Mhm.
But I shouldn't say this because for us it's like more work, it's fun, but there's also like a reason to let people buy new TVs at the end of the day
Mhm.
and new phones. And it's also because everybody's looking at, I mean, a lot of people are watching movies on phones now.
Right. That is a good thing to bring up. I recently invested into an iPad,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have my ISO calibrated, and this is a good topic to also bring up, especially during the pandemic where everyone's working from home. And I've been hearing a lot of colorist work on like they'll do like a second pass or they'll judge a second pass on an iPad.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about doing that? Is that the route we're going, or should we go away from that? What do you think?
What do I think? I mean, the reality is that during the pandemic, but even before, iPads were, and the Pad Pro especially,
Mhm.
they've been pretty good with color management. I mean, they're very color accurate, and that's why they've been the standard for a while
Mhm.
to tell clients what to look at. And, you can also do some tweaks and make sure that they see pretty much what you're doing.
Mhm.
So this is a trend that I think it's here to stay.
Mm.
Now, would I say do your master HDR grade on an iPad? No, it's not even possible.
Right.
But for review, people have been using, LG
Mhm.
OLED TVs, have been using iPads, and I think it's also depends on where is your project going, right? I mean, if your project is going to a streaming service and that that will be the main channel, it's okay.
Yes.
If your project is going, it's documentary, it's fine too. If it's going to a movie theater, well, you should definitely go to a movie theater screening.
Mhm. Yeah, being able to work in that wider gamut for projectors, DCI, would probably be more ideal in that scenario. I would imagine.
Yeah, even though they're not there yet in terms of HDR, but they will.
Hmm. Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure in the next few years we'll get there.
but you're right. We can't judge our masters. Definitely not off an iPad. That's something we should not do. But it can be a useful tool to just see if you are outputting to the web or something along those lines. I would definitely say it useful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a useful tool if you don't know where your client is remotely reviewing your work. I mean, that's as a colorist, that's our biggest nightmare. And
Yes.
that's why big color house, they spend a lot of money and they send clients iPads, they do calibration, they do anything possible,
Hmm.
to make sure that the client really sees what they're seeing.
Yeah, definitely. Have you checked out Frame.io or using that as a service for reviewing?
Yes, a lot.
Nice.
It's been very useful. I mean, I used it before in the past too, but during the pandemic, this has been fantastic
Yeah,
for
yeah.
having client reviews.
What to wrap it up for our
Hmm.
podcast? What would you give like any advice to young like colorists, people trying to come into the game? Any like little tips, anything like that?
My tips, I have many tips. You
Okay,
ready for this?
sure.
Well, I mean, these are the same things that you hear all the time, and we already, said before a little bit in terms of like, you know, um, having an interest for art, having an interest for photography, like learning what was before us in the past. It's important because you never know who you're gonna work with, and so for your own cultural, I'm sure like that's the easiest part, right? But for me, the most important things are becoming an observer of your surroundings, your world. You start becoming very, very, when you go out, look at the light, how the light hits the leaves and how it hits the skin. And when you have those days where you have the clouds changing very fast and the light, I mean, you have to become totally into that. Because observing reality, it's fundamental, because you need to, because sometimes we, in the color room, we make up things that do not exist, and that's not good. You know, you need to know the world. And also, like, different places, like when you're traveling, you see the lights are different, the colors are different. So be an observant of that. Another thing I would suggest is to do a lot of practice. Because as I said in the beginning, you're like, you don't know what you're doing, even if you can do a nice grade on a shot, and then you don't know how to match to the second. So it seems basic, but that's very important, and that takes a while to develop. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. And yeah, get your hands dirty on it, you know, and also learn about codecs and all the questions you ask me. Like, I can tell you got it, you're into it because you ask the right questions, you know, about the codecs and the forms and all that. That's really important. I think I would say, don't, it's very hard in the beginning, but don't take it personal. If somebody makes a critique, it's not a critique to you.
Right.
It's like, you know, everybody sees a little bit different. You know, even food that you eat can affect the way you see the colors. So just like, don't take it personal and ask questions, clarification, try to understand what people want. And yeah, and you're good.
That light one is a very great tip. I love going on long walks and just observing light. It's beautiful, it really, because it allows you to just, in the madness of life and everything around you, where everything's noisy and fast, it allows you to just stop, you know, and just sort of observe and appreciate. You know, I think it's wonderful. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been a great chat. I hope that people listen to this and they take a lot away from it. I definitely think so. I greatly appreciate you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, and good luck with everything.